and of course the most important people to receive from CPA funding. So first, what is the Community Preservation Act, also known as CPA? So this was legislation that was signed into law in the year 2000, and it allows communities to place a surcharge of up to 3% on their property real estate tax amount. There are also several exemptions. nothing back from it. The CPA supports those projects that are often desired but underfunded, projects that can be easy to cut at town meeting when the budget gets tight. Importantly, residents decide how CPA funds are spent, so there's a lot of local control over what gets funding. CPA projects can also help, or CPA funds can also help fund projects and then lower the amount needed to bond. For instance, the Forbes building and the town hall rehabilitations could have both used CPA funds. And finally, CPA funds can be used for matching grants, which is a great way to help stretch the town's funds. So if Westborough were to adopt CPA, how would we do that? First, there are two ways to adopt it. The first way has only been used by about 1/3 of the communities that have adopted CPA so far, and it's basically a ballot petition. You gather enough signatures on a petition to place the question of CPA directly on a ballot. However, our committee would likely recommend that the town follow the second way to adopt CPA, which 2/3 of the communities have used, which is going through a legislative action. So the select board would decide on a surcharge percentage and any exemptions that they wanted to adopt. The question would be added to a town meeting warrant. If a majority of the voters approve at town meeting, the question would be placed on the next regularly scheduled ballot. And again, if a majority of voters approve there, CPA would be adopted here in Westborough. We would then need to establish our own community preservation committee. Once adopted, CPA and the exemptions must remain in place for 5 years. But after that, you can change the surcharge percentage, the exemptions, or completely repeal it. But you must follow the same process that you did to initially adopt it. So as I mentioned, CPA communities have a community preservation committee to establish. There are 5 mandated seats under the state enabling legislation that come from other boards and commissions in the community. And these include the Conservation Commission, the Planning Board, the Historical Commission, the Housing Authority, and something called the Board of Park Commissioners, which we're not sure that Westborough has, but we're looking into that. And then in addition to that, communities can choose to add up to 4 at-large members. These can be any at-large members from the community, or they can be sort of assigned seats like the other 5 seats from different boards and commissions. The CPC is required to annually produce a community preservation plan with input from the boards on the CPC, as well as a public hearing. And most importantly, the CPC reviews all requests for funding. So usually in communities that have a town meeting form of government, they begin to accept applications in the fall. They review them over the winter to make sure that they meet the requirements of CPA. They match with the goals of the community's preservation plan. And of course, the community has the funding to undertake those projects. The CPC then presents a list of recommended projects to spring annual town meeting. And at that town meeting, a majority of voters must approve those projects for the funds to be awarded to them. So at our meeting last week, many of your colleagues asked us about projects in other communities. So I'm going to run through some of those, as well as some potential projects here in Westborough that could take advantage of CPA funds. So for affordable housing, obviously the big thing is the creation of new affordable units, the actual construction of affordable units, as well as the purchase of existing units and converting them to affordable units through deed restrictions. Communities can also grant funds to the Affordable Housing Trust, which we now have in Westborough, and that allows the Affordable Housing Trust to be more flexible in their spending and use the funds as they see fit. So here in Westborough, again, we could use it to fund our Affordable Housing Trust. We could have constructed affordable units with CPA funds. And we can also use CPA funds for major maintenance and renovations to affordable units. Things like life safety systems and heating, air conditioning, things like that, new roofs, building envelope issues. So in historic preservation, and I realize these are a lot of words, but these presentations are going to be up on our website so folks can look at them a bit more. But many of the communities around us have used their CPA funds on a lot of their historic buildings in their towns. The big ones that folks might be familiar with are the acquisition of White Cliffs in Northborough, as well as the purchase of a preservation restriction on the Burnett House, the Stone House in Southborough. Many communities have also used their CPA funds to preserve their historic town documents, to renovate their vaults in their town halls, to make them climate controlled and a little more organized when they store those documents, and then also for archaeological purposes as well. Those are similar projects to what we would have in Westborough. Like I mentioned, the rehab of this building and of Town Hall could have used CPA funds, as well as the digitization of town records. Our Historical Commission has an ongoing project to repair gravestones, which could make use of CPA funds. And of course, many of our historic organizations here in Westborough have collections and historic documents. And finally, open space and recreation. Big project here was the purchase of Hassanamisit Woods in Grafton, which was a 200-acre parcel. They used existing CPA funds as well as bonding, federal and state grants to purchase that. Many other communities have purchased land. They've updated their trails. They've purchased signage, different things to improve access to the trails around their community. Invasive species removal, as well as the acquisition of conservation restrictions if a community is not outright purchasing a property. So here in Westborough, the open space and rec funds could have been used for a lot of our active recreation spaces, ADA improvements, purchasing properties such as the State Hospital and Zwicker properties, and in the future, potential expansion of our existing trail networks, as well as access to Huckamucka Pond. So what can CPA not be used for? Obviously, projects that are not oriented towards affordable housing, open space and recreation, or historic preservation. There's a lot of guidance from the Department of Revenue on what can and can't be used for CPA funds. Other things include sidewalks, indoor recreation spaces, athletic turf, churches, and I mentioned maintenance on affordable housing buildings. Like I said, you can use it on larger projects, but you can't use it for, updating kitchens or bathrooms, sort of smaller, more, quality of life type things, I guess. That's our presentation. Our next steps, we'll be looking to gather some more input from the public. Obviously, these two past sessions were geared towards boards and commissions and staff. And eventually we will make a recommendation to the select board, either way, to adopt or not CPA. But right now, we'd just love to hear from folks. If you have any comments or questions for us, we would certainly be interested. And we are going to pass the mic around because this is on Westborough TV. Any questions? No? It's a quiet group tonight. No? Mark, I guess you can ask a question.
One of the things I was wondering, can you
mic yourself up?
I can just talk loud.
No, for Westborough.
Hi, I was just wondering, Jen, can a private building owner apply to the CPC for the historical funds?
Yep.
Okay. You're
yes. And so, what?
Nodding yes, but need to say it.
Yes. So private property owners can apply for CPA funds. However, once they do that, or as a condition of applying for receiving those funds, the town acquires a preservation restriction on the building, which is basically the same as a conservation restriction. It, grants a property owner rights to that building, and it is a way to preserve the building in perpetuity, and it basically preserve the use of public funds for that purpose in perpetuity. All right, well, if there's no other questions, we do have an email address and we do have a website or a page on the town's website. So if you have any questions or comments, please let us know. And on the back of your survey, there's the same exact survey again. So we're hoping you'll take that and pass that back to us just so we can see how much you learned about CPA during our session. And Shelby does have the answers to the survey as well. So if you can hand us yours back, she'll hand you the answers. And thank you all again for coming tonight.